The rain hammered against the windows of Sterling Industries' towering headquarters as Marcus Hayes stood in the marble lobby, his worn leather boots creating small puddles on the pristine floor. Victoria Sterling's voice cut through the air like ice,
My daughter
each
needs
word
help.
dripping with disdain as she circled him like a predator sizing up prey. "You dare show your face here?" she hissed, her designer heels clicking against the floor. "A man like you, thinking you belong in my world?" The security guards moved closer, their hands reaching for Marcus's shoulders. But he stood firm, his weathered hands clenched at his sides, thinking only of the little girl waiting for him at home. Marcus Hayes had not always been the man standing in that lobby. 6 years ago, he had walked away from a life that most men only dreamed of. Trading boardrooms for bedtime stories, corporate mergers for morning pancakes, and international acclaim for the innocent laughter of his daughter Sophie. The transformation had been complete and deliberate, a choice made in a hospital room where he held a tiny bundle of life while machines beeped their final farewell to his wife Claire. In that moment, as Sophie's tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, Marcus made a promise that would reshape his entire existence. He would be the father she needed, even if it meant burying the man he used to be so deep that no one would ever find him again. The penthouse apartment became a modest two-bedroom rental in Brooklyn. The designer suits transformed into flannel shirts and jeans, and the name that once commanded respect in 5 languages became just another face in the crowd of parents at Roosevelt Elementary School. Sophie Hayes was 7 years old, with her mother's emerald eyes and her father's determined chin, a combination that made her both beautiful and formidable in the innocent way that only children can manage. She possessed an intelligence that surprised her teachers and a kindness that made her beloved among her classmates. But most of all, she had an unshakable faith in her father that could move mountains. Every morning she would wake up to the smell of scrambled eggs and toast, prepared by hands that she didn't know had once signed deals worth billions. And every night, she would fall asleep to stories told by a voice that had once addressed the United Nations. To Sophie, Marcus wasn't a mystery or a man with secrets. He was simply Dad, the one who braided her hair with patient fingers, who knew exactly how much chocolate syrup belonged in her milk, and who could make any monster under the bed disappear with just his presence. Victoria Sterling ruled her empire from the top floor of a building that scraped the Manhattan sky, a monument to ambition built on the foundation of her father's legacy and expanded through her own ruthless brilliance. At 34, she had achieved what most couldn't in a lifetime, transforming Sterling Industries from a successful company into a global powerhouse that influenced markets on 3 continents. Her beauty was weaponized perfection. From her platinum blonde hair that never had a strand out of place to her wardrobe that cost more than most people's annual salaries. She had learned early that power was the only currency that mattered, and she collected it the way others collected art, displaying it in every gesture, every word, every calculated smile that never quite reached her Arctic blue eyes. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford, kindness a weakness she couldn't tolerate, and mercy a word that had been excised from her vocabulary along with failure and compromise. The world existed to serve her vision, and those who couldn't keep up were simply obstacles to be removed or ignored. The collision of these 2 worlds began on an unseasonably warm Tuesday in October, when Marcus stood outside Sterling Industries with a manila envelope that contained Sophie's medical records and a plea that had cost him more pride than he had left to spare. Sophie needed a specialized treatment that only Sterling Medical, a subsidiary of Victoria's empire, could provide. And the insurance company had denied coverage for what they deemed an experimental procedure. He had exhausted every other option, liquidated what little savings he had managed to accumulate, and even swallowed his pride enough to reach out to old contacts who might remember him, though none had responded. Standing in that lobby, watching the suited executive stream past him like he was invisible, Marcus felt the weight of his choices pressing down on his shoulders. The receptionist, a young woman named Jennifer with sympathetic eyes and a nervous smile, had tried to explain that Miss Sterling didn't take unscheduled appointments, that there were procedures and protocols, proper channels that needed to be followed. But Marcus had learned long ago that sometimes the proper channels were designed to keep people like him, people who looked like him now, from ever reaching the people who could actually help. The confrontation that followed would become legend among the Sterling Industries employees, whispered about in break rooms and discussed in hushed tones over coffee. Victoria had emerged from her private elevator like an avenging angel dressed in Armani, her face a mask of controlled fury at the disruption to her carefully orchestrated day. She took one look at Marcus, at his flannel shirt and worn jeans, at the desperation barely concealed behind his dignified posture, and her lip curled in disgust. "Security," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been disobeyed. "Remove this man immediately." But Marcus didn't move. Didn't even flinch when the guards grabbed his arms. Instead, he looked directly at Victoria, and something in his gaze made her pause, though she would never admit it. "My daughter is sick," he said, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "She needs treatment that only your medical division can provide. I'm not asking for charity. I can work for it. Pay it back over time. Please." The please seemed to physically pain him, and Victoria noticed, filing it away as another sign of weakness. Victoria's laugh was crystalline and cruel, echoing off the marble walls like breaking glass. "Work for it?" she repeated, her voice dripping with amusement. "And what exactly could you possibly do for Sterling Industries? Do you have any idea who I am? What this company represents? We don't hire people off the street because they have sob stories." She walked closer, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm that sounded like a countdown. "Every day, hundreds of people want something from me. Money, jobs, favors, miracles. If I helped every single parent with a sick child, I'd be bankrupt within a month." The employees who had gathered to watch the spectacle shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to intervene. Marcus felt the heat rise in his face, but he kept his voice level. "I'm not every parent," he said quietly. "I'm one father, asking for one chance. Test me. Give me any job, any task. Let me prove that I'm worth the investment." Victoria studied him for a long moment, and a smile played at the corners of her mouth, but it wasn't kind. It was the smile of a cat who had just noticed that the mouse was willing to play. "Fine," Victoria said, her decision surprising everyone, including herself. "You want a chance? I'll give you a chance. But not because I believe in you or your little sob story. I'll give you a chance because I think it will be amusing to watch you fail." She turned to Jennifer, who was watching with wide eyes. "Put him in maintenance. Night shift. He can start tonight." She looked back at Marcus, her blue eyes glittering with malice. "You'll work here for 6 months. If you last that long without missing a single shift, without a single complaint, without causing any problems, I'll consider reviewing your daughter's case. Consider, not guarantee. And if you fail, if you miss even one day, if you're late even once, you leave and never come back. Do we have a deal?" The terms were harsh, almost impossible for a single parent with a sick child, and Victoria knew it. She expected him to refuse, to storm out in anger, or break down in defeat. Instead, Marcus extended his hand, his grip firm when she reluctantly shook it. "Deal," he said simply. And for just a moment, Victoria felt something she couldn't quite identify, a flicker of something that might have been respect if she had been capable of feeling such a thing for someone so far beneath her station. That night, Marcus reported to the basement of Sterling Industries, where the maintenance supervisor, a gruff man named Earl Patterson, looked him up and down with skeptical eyes. "So you're the one who made a scene upstairs," Earl said, handing him a uniform that had seen better days. "Miss Sterling called down herself. Told me to give you the worst jobs we got. Said she wants daily reports on your performance." He paused, studying Marcus's face. "Look, I don't know what you did to piss her off, but this ain't gonna be easy. The night shift handles all the dirty work, the stuff the day crew won't touch. You sure you want to do this?" Marcus thought of Sophie, at home with Mrs. Chen from next door, doing her homework and waiting for his call to say goodnight. "I'm sure," he said, and something in his tone made Earl nod slowly. The first night was hell. Marcus cleaned bathrooms that executives had soiled, scrubbed floors that seemed to accumulate dirt faster than he could clean them, and emptied trash bins filled with the remnants of lives far removed from his current reality. His hands, once soft from signing documents, blistered and bled. His back, strong as it was, ached from constant bending and lifting. But every time he wanted to quit, every time the humiliation threatened to overwhelm him, he thought of Sophie's face when he had promised her that everything would be okay. The other maintenance workers watched him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. There was Raymond Cruz, a father of 3 who had been working nights for 5 years, and Dmitry Volkov, a Russian immigrant who spoke broken English, but whose eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen too much. They didn't understand why someone like Marcus, who clearly didn't belong there, would subject himself to this work. But they recognized determination when they saw it. "You got kids?" Raymond asked during a break on the third night, offering Marcus a cup of coffee from his thermos. When Marcus nodded, Raymond's expression softened. "Then you'll make it. We all do what we got to do for our kids." Dmitri nodded in agreement, adding in his thick accent, "In Russia, I was engineer. Here, I clean toilets. But my children, they go to good school, have better life. Is worth it, no?" Marcus found himself oddly comforted by their acceptance, by the simple understanding that came from shared sacrifice. Victoria, meanwhile, watched from her ivory tower, receiving Earl's daily reports with increasing interest. She had expected Marcus to quit within a week, had bet her personal assistant, James Morrison, $1,000 that he wouldn't last the month. But every morning, Earl's report was the same. Hayes showed up on time, worked without complaint, did everything asked of him and more. She found herself staying late some nights, watching the security monitors as Marcus pushed his cart through the halls, his movements efficient despite his obvious exhaustion. There was something about the way he carried himself, a dignity that the uniform and the menial work couldn't strip away, that nagged at her. She told herself it was simple curiosity, the same interest one might have in watching an ant carry a load 10 times its weight. But sometimes, when she saw him pause to stretch his back or notice the careful way he organized his supplies, she felt that flicker again, stronger now, threatening to become something she couldn't ignore. Sophie, for her part, adapted to the new routine with the resilience that only children possess. She understood that Daddy had to work at night now, that he would be tired during the day, but she never complained. Instead, she became his cheerleader, leaving notes in his lunch bag that said things like, "You're the best daddy in the world, and I love you to the moon and back." She drew pictures of him as a superhero, complete with a cape and muscles, which made Marcus laugh even when his body ached so much he could barely move. Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, had become like a grandmother to Sophie, teaching her to make dumplings and helping with homework while Marcus slept during the day. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it worked, held together by love and determination and the kind of hope that refuses to die even in the darkest circumstances. 3 weeks into his employment, the first test came. Victoria had arranged for a special board meeting, one that would run late into the night, and she specifically requested that the maintenance crew clean the boardroom while the meeting was in session. It was unheard of, a deliberate humiliation designed to break Marcus's composure. As he entered the room with his cart, 20 pairs of eyes turned to look at him, including Victoria's, which glittered with cruel anticipation. The board members, titans of industry all, looked through him as if he were invisible, continuing their discussion about quarterly projections and market expansions. Marcus moved silently around the room, emptying wastebaskets and wiping down surfaces, his face a mask of professional indifference. But as he worked, he listened, and what he heard made his hands clench around the mop handle. They were discussing a merger that he knew, from his past life, would be disastrous. A move that looked good on paper, but would ultimately cost thousands of jobs and tank the stock within 2 years. Every instinct screamed at him to speak up, to save them from their mistake, but he bit his tongue until it bled, remembering Sophie, remembering his promise. One board member, Harrison Blackwood, deliberately knocked over his coffee as Marcus passed, the hot liquid splashing across the mahogany table and onto the floor. "Clean that up," he said dismissively, not even looking at Marcus. Victoria watched, waiting for the explosion, for the moment when Marcus would break and reveal his true nature. Instead, he simply nodded, got down on his knees, and began cleaning the spill with methodical precision. As he worked, his mind cataloged everything. The nervous tick in Blackwood's left eye that indicated he was bluffing about his division's numbers. The way Victoria's CFO, Nathan Cross, kept checking his phone with increasing anxiety, suggesting problems he wasn't sharing. The subtle alliance forming between two board members who were clearly planning a power play. Information had always been his weapon of choice, and even now, reduced to this, he couldn't help but gather it, store it, analyze it. The meeting continued around him as if he were furniture, and when he finally left, Victoria felt an unexpected disappointment that he hadn't cracked. The next morning, something unusual happened. An anonymous memo appeared on Victoria's desk, written on plain paper with no identifying marks. It contained a brief but devastating analysis of the proposed merger, outlining exactly why it would fail and suggesting an alternative approach that would achieve the same goals without the risks. Victoria read it 3 times, her heart racing as she recognized the brilliant strategic mind behind the words. She called in her security team, demanding to know how someone had accessed her office, but the cameras showed nothing unusual. The memo's suggestions were so compelling that she presented them to the board as her own ideas, and they were unanimously approved. But the question nagged at her: who had written it? She found herself looking at her employees differently, searching for signs of hidden intelligence. But her gaze kept returning to the security footage of Marcus cleaning the boardroom, his face revealing nothing as chaos swirled around him. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus became a fixture in the Sterling Industries ecosystem, albeit one that existed in the shadows. The night shift workers had accepted him as one of their own, and he found an unexpected camaraderie in their shared struggles. Raymond taught him tricks for making the work easier on his body, while Dimitri shared stories of his homeland that made the long nights pass more quickly. Even Earl had warmed to him, occasionally bringing extra sandwiches that his wife had made, gruffly insisting that Marcus needed to keep his strength up. But it was the small interactions with the day staff that began to shift the atmosphere in subtle ways. Marcus had a habit of leaving the offices he cleaned slightly better organized than he found them, fixing small problems that others hadn't even noticed. A wobbly desk chair would suddenly be stable. A flickering light would be repaired. A coffee maker that had been making strange noises would run smoothly again. The junior executives began to notice these small improvements, and whispers started to circulate about the mysterious night janitor who seemed to have an uncanny ability to fix problems. Jessica Park, a young analyst in the financial department, had been struggling with a complex spreadsheet for days when she came in one morning to find a sticky note on her monitor with a simple formula that solved everything. She had no idea who had left it, but she suspected it was the quiet man she sometimes saw in the early mornings when she came in early. Thomas Wright from IT swore that someone had reorganized his server room in a way that improved efficiency by 30%, but the security footage just showed Marcus cleaning, never touching the equipment. These small mysteries began to add up, creating a legend around the night janitor who might be more than he seemed. Victoria noticed the changes too, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what was different. The building ran more smoothly. Problems were solved before they became crises. And there was a subtle shift in the energy of the place that she couldn't explain. She found herself staying later and later, telling herself it was because of work, but really she was watching, waiting, trying to catch Marcus in the act of being extraordinary. One night she confronted him directly, appearing suddenly in a hallway as he was mopping. "It's you, isn't it?" she said, her voice accusatory. "The memo, the improvements, all of it." "Who are you really?" Marcus looked up from his work, his face carefully neutral. "I'm just a janitor, Miss Sterling," he said quietly. A father trying to earn medical care for his daughter. The simplicity of his response, the quiet dignity in his voice, made her angrier than any defiance could have. "Nobody is just anything," she snapped. "Everyone has secrets." "What are yours?" But Marcus simply returned to his mopping, and after a moment, Victoria stormed off, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. The truth about Marcus's past was both simpler and more complex than Victoria could have imagined. He had once been Marcus Blackstone, the legendary consultant known as the Ghost in corporate circles. A man who could turn failing companies into gold mines and who commanded fees that made even CEOs blanch. He had built his reputation on an almost supernatural ability to see patterns others missed, to understand not just businesses but the people who ran them. His wife, Claire, had been his anchor, the one who kept him grounded when the demands of his work threatened to consume him. They had met in college, when he was just a brilliant kid with big dreams, and she was the artist who saw the world in colors he couldn't imagine. She had supported him through the lean years, celebrated with him during the victories, and when she got sick, he had thrown every resource at his disposal into trying to save her. But cancer doesn't care about money or connections, and in the end, all his success meant nothing. She died 6 hours after Sophie was born, her last words a plea for him to be the father their daughter deserved. The decision to disappear had been instantaneous and irrevocable. Marcus Blackstone died with Claire, and Marcus Hayes was born in a small apartment in Brooklyn, where he learned to braid hair from online tutorials and to make mac and cheese exactly the way Sophie liked it. He had enough money saved to last a lifetime if they lived modestly, but he had chosen to work normal jobs, to give Sophie a normal life, to be present in a way that Marcus Blackstone never could have been. The construction work, the delivery driving, the temporary positions, they were all part of a deliberate transformation, a way of becoming someone new. He had thought he could leave the corporate world behind entirely, but life has a way of circling back. And here he was, cleaning the offices of people who would have paid millions for his advice, all for the chance to save his daughter. 4 months into his employment, Sophie's condition worsened. She had been managing with basic treatments, but the doctors were clear. Without the experimental procedure, she had perhaps a year, maybe less. Marcus stood in the hospital room, watching his little girl sleep, her face pale against the white pillows, and felt rage build in his chest. Not at Victoria or Sterling Industries, but at himself. For choosing pride over pragmatism. For not revealing himself and demanding what his reputation could have commanded. But then Sophie opened her eyes, smiled at him, and said, "Don't look so sad, Daddy. Everything's going to be okay. You promised, remember?" And in that moment, he knew he would continue, would endure any humiliation, would sacrifice every shred of pride he had left. Because she believed in him, and that was worth more than all the corporate victories he had ever achieved. The night that changed everything started like any other. Marcus was cleaning the executive floor, working his way methodically through the offices, when he heard shouting from Victoria's office. Through the partially open door, he could see her on a video call with someone, her face flushed with anger and something that looked almost like fear. "That's impossible," she was saying. "The algorithms are proprietary. No one outside the company even knows they exist." The person on the screen was speaking rapidly, but Marcus couldn't make out the words. Then Victoria said something that made his blood run cold. "If this gets out, if the SEC finds out what we've been doing, it's not just the company that goes down. We're talking about criminal charges, Harrison, prison." Marcus recognized the name Harrison Blackwood, the same board member who had spilled coffee on him months ago. He was about to move away when Victoria slammed her laptop shut and put her head in her hands. And for the first time since he'd met her, she looked vulnerable, human, scared. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone else. He knocked on the door. Victoria's head snapped up, her vulnerability immediately replaced by fury. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "This floor should have been cleaned hours ago." Marcus entered the office, closing the door behind him. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said carefully. "You have a problem with the Blackwood situation." Victoria stood, her body rigid with tension. "You were eavesdropping? I'll have you fired immediately." "Security." But Marcus held up a hand. "Before you do that, let me ask you something. The algorithm he's talking about, is it the one you use for high-frequency trading? The one that analyzes market patterns in real time and makes microsecond decisions?" Victoria's face went white. "How could you possibly know about that?" Marcus walked to her whiteboard, picked up a marker, and began writing. "Because the vulnerability isn't in the algorithm itself. It's in the implementation. You're using a recursive function that doesn't properly sanitize inputs, which means someone who knows what they're doing could inject false data that would make the algorithm trade against itself." For 5 minutes, Marcus wrote, explaining in precise detail not just the problem but the solution, his hand moving with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Victoria watched in stunned silence as the janitor she had humiliated for months revealed an understanding of complex financial systems that rivaled her best engineers. When he finished, he set down the marker and turned to face her. "You have about 6 hours before Blackwood's people crack the rest of the system," he said quietly. "If you implement these changes now, you can not only stop them but trace the attack back to its source, which will give you the evidence you need to have him removed from the board and potentially arrested for corporate espionage." Victoria stared at him, then at the board, then back at him. "Who are you?" she whispered. Marcus was about to answer when his phone rang. It was the hospital. Sophie had collapsed at Mrs. Chen's apartment and was being rushed to emergency surgery. The next few hours were a blur. Marcus ran from the building, Victoria's shouts echoing behind him. But he didn't care about the job anymore, didn't care about the deal or the consequences. He arrived at the hospital to find Sophie in critical condition, the doctors speaking in hushed, urgent tones about procedures and permissions and insurance that wouldn't cover what needed to be done. He was about to reveal everything, to call in every favor from his past life, when Victoria Sterling walked into the hospital waiting room, flanked by the best medical team money could buy. "Where is she?" Victoria demanded, and when the doctors tried to explain about protocols and procedures, she cut them off with a look that could have frozen hell. "I don't care about your protocols. That girl gets whatever she needs. Sterling Industries will cover everything. And I mean everything." She turned to Marcus, and for the first time, there was no coldness in her eyes, only a strange mixture of respect and something that might have been regret. "We need to talk," she said. "But first, we save your daughter." The surgery took 14 hours. Marcus and Victoria sat in the waiting room, an odd pair, the billionaire CEO in her designer suit and the janitor in his work clothes. As the hours ticked by, Victoria finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Marcus Blackstone. You're Marcus Blackstone, aren't you? The ghost?" Marcus didn't deny it. There seemed no point anymore. "I was," he said simply. "How did you figure it out?" Victoria pulled out her phone, showing him a photograph from a corporate event 8 years ago. A younger Marcus stood next to several industry leaders, his face partially obscured but recognizable if you knew what to look for. "I've been staring at this picture for the past hour," she said. "You consulted for my father once, didn't you? Before he died?" Marcus nodded. "He was a good man. He would be proud of what you've built." Victoria was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Why didn't you just tell me who you were? I would have helped Sophie immediately if I'd known." Marcus looked at her with eyes that held no accusation, only a deep weariness. "Would you have? Or would you have assumed I was a fraud, a has-been trying to trade on past glory? And even if you had believed me, what then?" "I didn't want Sophie to grow up as Marcus Blackstone's daughter, surrounded by wealth and privilege, but never knowing if people cared about her or her father's name. I wanted her to have what I never had, a parent who was there, who chose her over everything else every single day." He paused, running his hand through his hair. "Claire made me promise before she died. She said Sophie would have plenty of people who could give her things, but she needed someone who would give her time. So I became someone who had nothing but time to give." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she had built so carefully that she had forgotten it was there. "You gave up everything," she said softly. "For her." Marcus smiled, a sad, gentle smile. "No," he said. "I gained everything. You just don't understand that yet." The doctor emerged at dawn, exhausted but smiling. The surgery had been successful. Sophie would need time to recover, but she was going to be fine. Marcus collapsed into a chair, the relief so overwhelming that he couldn't speak. Victoria watched him, this man who had endured months of humiliation without breaking, finally allowing himself to cry. She thought about her own life, the empire she had built, the respect she commanded, the fear she inspired, and wondered when she had last felt anything as pure as what she was witnessing. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology. Several, actually. The way I treated you, the things I said." But Marcus shook his head. "You were being who you thought you needed to be," he said. "Just like I was. We all wear masks, Victoria. The trick is knowing when to take them off." Sophie woke up 3 days later to find her room filled with flowers, balloons, and more stuffed animals than she could count. But the first thing she saw was her father's face, and her smile was brighter than all the gifts combined. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. "I knew you'd fix everything." Marcus kissed her forehead, his throat too tight to speak. Victoria stood in the doorway, watching the reunion with an expression that her employees wouldn't have recognized. She had spent the past 3 days not just ensuring Sophie got the best care, but also investigating Marcus's past, understanding the full scope of what he had given up. She had found records of deals worth hundreds of millions, testimonials from CEOs who credited him with saving their companies, and a life of luxury that he had simply walked away from. But more than that, she had found stories of a man who had loved his wife with a devotion that seemed almost mythical in their world of prenups and affairs. and who had transferred that love wholly to his daughter. On the fourth day, as Sophie was sitting up and chatting animatedly about her missing school, Victoria made Marcus an offer. "Come back," she said simply. "Not as a janitor, not even as a consultant. Come back as my partner. Equal equity, equal authority. Help me build something that actually matters." Marcus looked at her in surprise. "Why would you do that?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because in the past 4 months, you've taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. You showed me that strength isn't about power or money or making others feel small. It's about knowing what matters and protecting it, no matter the cost." She paused, then added, "And because you were right about the merger, about the improvements, about everything, Sterling Industries needs someone who sees people, not just profits." Marcus looked at Sophie, who was pretending to sleep but clearly listening. "What do you think, Princess?" he asked. Sophie opened one eye. "I think you should do whatever makes you happy, Daddy. But maybe you could work during the day now? I miss our bedtime stories." The news of Marcus's true identity spread through Sterling Industries like wildfire. The employees who had watched him clean their offices were stunned, embarrassed, and in some cases, ashamed of how they had treated him. Jessica Park, the analyst he had helped, was mortified to realize that the sticky note had come from one of the most brilliant strategic minds in the business. But it was the night shift crew that had the most interesting reaction. Earl Patterson just laughed when he heard the news. "I knew there was something different about you," he said, slapping Marcus on the back. "Nobody organizes cleaning supplies with that much strategic thinking unless they've run something bigger." Raymond and Dimitri were hurt at first, feeling deceived. But when Marcus explained about Sophie, about Claire, about wanting to be just a father for once, they understood. "You were never playing at being one of us," Dimitri said thoughtfully. "You were one of us. Just a father doing what he had to do." The transformation of Sterling Industries began slowly but inevitably. Marcus accepted Victoria's offer, but with conditions. The night shift workers would receive a substantial raise and better benefits. The company would establish a fund for employees' families facing medical crises. And most importantly, the culture would change. No more humiliation, no more treating people as less than human because of their position. Victoria agreed to everything, surprising herself with how easy it was to say yes. The board was shocked when she introduced Marcus as her co-CEO, even more so when she revealed his identity. Harrison Blackwood, who was facing federal charges thanks to the evidence Marcus had helped uncover, was notably absent. But the others, remembering the quiet janitor who had cleaned up after them, felt a mixture of respect and unease. The power dynamics had shifted in a way none of them could have predicted. Marcus and Victoria's partnership was unlike anything the corporate world had seen. Where she was ice, he was warmth. Where he was strategic patience, she was decisive action. They balanced each other in ways that made Sterling Industries not just more profitable but more human. Victoria learned to see her employees as people with stories and struggles, while Marcus relearned how to wield power without losing himself in it. They fought, certainly, passionate arguments about strategy and ethics that became legendary in the office. But underneath the conflict was a respect that grew into something deeper. Sophie, who visited the office regularly now, declared that Victoria was not as scary as she pretends to be, which made the CEO laugh for the first time anyone could remember. 6 months after the surgery, Sophie was not just recovered but thriving. She had returned to school with a new confidence, her experience having given her a maturity beyond her years. She still drew pictures of her father as a superhero, but now she included Victoria in them, usually as a warrior princess with a briefcase instead of a sword. The three of them had developed an unlikely family dynamic, Marcus and Sophie in their Brooklyn apartment that Marcus refused to leave despite his restored wealth, and Victoria, who found herself joining them for dinner more and more often, learning to appreciate the simple pleasure of Sophie's chatter and Marcus's cooking. The Sterling Industries employees watched this evolution with amazement, seeing their Ice Queen CEO sitting in the company cafeteria, sharing lunch with the maintenance staff she had once ignored, listening to their stories with genuine interest. The revelation that became public a year later sent shockwaves through the business world. A journalist had pieced together the story of Marcus Blackstone's transformation into Marcus Hayes and back again, including his months as a janitor at Sterling Industries. The article, titled "The Ghost in the Machine: How a Billionaire Consultant Became a Janitor," to save his daughter went viral in hours. But what captured the public's imagination wasn't just Marcus's sacrifice. It was Victoria's transformation. Internal emails, leaked by an employee who had witnessed the whole saga, showed her evolution from someone who had dismissed a desperate father to someone who had rushed to a hospital in the middle of the night to save a child. She had no obligation to help. The emails revealed something else too. A growing affection between Marcus and Victoria that neither of them had acknowledged publicly, but which was evident in their increasingly personal exchanges. The media frenzy that followed forced both of them to confront what had been building between them. Victoria had never allowed herself to be vulnerable with anyone, had built her life on the principle that love was weakness. But Marcus had shown her that strength could coexist with gentleness, that power didn't have to mean isolation. For his part, Marcus had thought he could never love again after Claire, that his heart had room only for Sophie. But Victoria had surprised him, not just with her transformation, but with the woman she had always been underneath the armor. Brilliant, passionate, and capable of tremendous loyalty once her trust was earned. The conversation happened in Victoria's office, late one evening when Sophie was at a sleepover. "This is complicated," Victoria said, not looking at him. "Everything about my life is complicated," Marcus replied. "But Sophie asked me something yesterday. She asked if you made me happy. And I realized that you do." Victoria turned to face him then, and for once, her expression was completely open. "She makes me happy too," she said. "Both of you do. I didn't know I could feel this way. I didn't think I deserved to." The wedding, when it came, was small and perfect. Sophie was the flower girl, of course, beaming as she walked down the aisle in a dress that Victoria had helped her pick out. The guest list was eclectic. Billionaire board members sitting next to night shift janitors, Marcus's old clients mixing with Victoria's society friends. Earl Patterson was a groomsman, which he claimed was the most ridiculous thing that had ever happened to him, but which clearly pleased him immensely. In her vows, Victoria spoke about learning to see beyond surfaces, about the man who had taught her that true power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. Marcus spoke about second chances, about finding light in unexpected places, about how sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what really matters. But it was Sophie who stole the show during the reception, giving a speech that she had written herself. "My daddy always told me that families come in all shapes and sizes," she said, her young voice clear and confident. "Some families are born, and some families are made. Victoria isn't my mom by birth, but she chose to be my mom by love, and that's even more special. And Daddy chose to be himself again, which means I get to see him happy, and that's the best gift ever." The years that followed saw Sterling Industries become a model for corporate responsibility and human-centered capitalism. The company's profits soared, but more importantly, it became known as a place where people mattered, where a janitor's idea was valued as much as an executive's, where families were supported through crises, and where second chances were given freely. Marcus and Victoria had two more children together, twins who grew up knowing that their father had once mopped floors in the building where he now made decisions that affected thousands of lives, and that their mother had learned to love by watching a 7-year-old girl fight for her life. Sophie, now a teenager, often told the story to her younger siblings about how Daddy had been a secret superhero and how Mom had been the dragon who became a princess. It was a simplification, of course, but like all good fairy tales, it contained an essential truth. Marcus never forgot the lessons of his time as a janitor. He instituted a policy that every executive at Sterling Industries had to spend a week each year working in maintenance, customer service, or another frontline position. The practice, initially met with resistance, became transformative. Executives gained empathy and understanding, while workers felt seen and valued. Victoria, for her part, became known for her annual speech to new employees, where she told the story of the janitor who had changed her life. "Every person in this building has a story," she would say. "Every person has skills and insights that might surprise you. The cleaner might be a genius, the receptionist might have the solution to your biggest problem, and the person you dismiss today might be the one who saves your company tomorrow. Never forget that." On Sophie's 18th birthday, as she prepared to leave for college where she would study medicine, inspired by the doctors who had saved her life, she stood in the same lobby where her father had first been humiliated by Victoria all those years ago. The three of them, Marcus, Victoria, and Sophie, looked at the spot where it had all begun. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophie asked her father. The months of being treated like you were nothing? Marcus pulled both his daughter and his wife close. How could I regret the path that led us here? He said. Every moment of humiliation, every night of exhaustion, every sacrifice, it was all worth it. Because it taught me, taught all of us, that dignity isn't about what others think of you. It's about knowing who you are and what you're willing to do for the people you love, Victoria added. And it taught me that power without compassion is just emptiness dressed in expensive clothes. Your father didn't just save you, Sophie. He saved me too. The story of Marcus Hayes became a legend in corporate America, told in business schools and boardrooms as an example of integrity, sacrifice, and the transformative power of love. But for Marcus himself, the greatest achievement wasn't the redemption or the recognition or even the love he had found with Victoria. It was the simple fact that he had kept his promise to Claire. He had been there for every school play, every soccer game, every nightmare and triumph. He had been the father Sophie deserved, even when it cost him everything. And in return, she had given him a reason to become whole again. The man who had once been a ghost in the corporate machine had become something far more powerful. A father, a husband, a leader who understood that true strength comes not from what you can take from others, but from what you're willing to give. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting golden light through the windows of Sterling Industries, Marcus stood in the office that had once been Victoria's alone but was now theirs together. The wall that had once held only awards and achievements now also displayed Sophie's childhood drawings, photos from family vacations, and a framed note from the night shift crew that said simply, "Welcome back, Marcus. You never really left." On his desk was a photo from their wedding, but also one from his days as a janitor, a reminder of the journey that had brought them all to this moment. Victoria entered the office, having just finished a meeting with the board about their latest initiative, a program to provide free medical care to the children of all Sterling Industries employees, named the Sophie Hayes Foundation. She called, Victoria said, referring to Sophie. She aced her anatomy exam. Marcus smiled. The same gentle smile that had sustained him through those long nights of cleaning. Of course she did. She's her mother's daughter. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Which mother? Marcus pulled her close. Both of them. The truth that Marcus had learned, that Victoria had discovered, that Sophie had always known, was beautifully simple. Love is not diminished by sacrifice. It is multiplied by it. Every act of humiliation Marcus had endured had been transformed into triumph, not through revenge or vindication, but through the simple act of maintaining his dignity and protecting what mattered most. Victoria's journey from ice queen to devoted mother and partner proved that it's never too late to learn empathy, never too late to choose love over power. And Sophie, the little girl whose illness had started it all, became living proof that sometimes the greatest catastrophes lead to the most beautiful destinations. The family they had built, unconventional, unexpected, and absolutely unbreakable, stood as testament to the power of choosing love over pride, sacrifice over selfishness, and hope over resignation. In the end, the story of the janitor who was actually a billionaire, the CEO who learned to love, and the little girl who brought them together wasn't really about the revelation of hidden identity or corporate success. It was about the courage it takes to be vulnerable, the strength required to change, and the miraculous ways that love can transform even the most impossible situations into something beautiful. Marcus had started his journey believing he was sacrificing his identity for his daughter. Victoria had begun hers believing that power was the only truth worth pursuing. But together they discovered that identity isn't about what you've achieved or what others call you. It's about who you choose to be when everything is on the line. And sometimes, just sometimes, choosing to be nothing more than a loving parent, a faithful partner, and a good person is the most powerful choice of all. The Sterling Industries building still stands tall in Manhattan, a monument to ambition and achievement. But those who know its story understand that its true foundation isn't steel and concrete. It's the love of a father for his daughter, the transformation of a woman who learned to see beyond surfaces, and the proof that dignity, respect, and compassion are the only currencies that truly matter in the end. And somewhere in Brooklyn, in a modest apartment that a billionaire still calls home, the story continues, not with dramatic revelations or corporate takeovers, but with the simple, precious moments of a family that was forged in hardship, tested by humiliation, and ultimately triumphant through the power of unconditional love. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the Montana blizzard, each swipe revealing nothing but white fury for the briefest moment before the snow reclaimed the glass. Owen Carter gripped the steering wheel with both hands, his knuckles pale in the dashboard's dim glow, while his 8-year-old daughter Penny hummed softly in the back seat, her voice a fragile thread of normalcy in the chaos. Scout, their golden retriever, pressed his nose against the rear window, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the world disappear into the storm. The truck crawled forward at 15 miles per hour, its headlights carving weak tunnels through the whiteout that seemed to close behind them like a living thing. Owen had driven through plenty of Montana winters, but this storm felt different, felt hungry, as if the mountain itself had decided to swallow everything in its path. "Daddy, are we almost home?" Penny's voice carried that particular note of forced bravery that children adopt when they're trying not to show fear. Owen caught her eyes in the rearview mirror, wide and trusting despite the violent shaking of the truck as wind gusts slammed into them from the north. He forced a smile that he hoped looked more confident than he felt. 20 more minutes, sweetheart. Scout's keeping watch, aren't you, boy?" The golden retriever's tail thumped once against the seat, but his attention remained fixed on something outside, his entire body suddenly rigid with alertness. Before Owen could process the dog's behavior, Scout erupted into motion, barking with an urgency that made Penny jump. The retriever launched himself over the seats toward the driver's side door, his 70 pounds of muscle and determination nearly causing Owen to lose control of the wheel. "Scout, down." "What the hell?" But the dog was already pawing frantically at the door handle, whining with a desperation Owen had never heard from him before. Through the storm's howling came another sound, barely audible but unmistakably there. A metallic groaning that didn't belong to the wind. Owen's foot found the brake, the truck sliding slightly before coming to a stop. Scout's barking intensified, his whole body trembling with the need to get outside. "Stay in the truck, Penny. Lock the doors behind me." Owen pulled on his coat and opened the door, immediately regretting it as the wind hit him like a frozen sledgehammer. Scout shot past him into the white void, disappearing instantly. Owen stumbled after him, shouting the dog's name into the wind that threw his words back at him like ice pellets. 10 feet from the truck, he could barely see its taillights anymore. 20 feet, and he was alone in a world of white and gray, following Scout's barking like a lifeline. His boots sank deep with each step, the snow already past his knees, and he wondered with a sick feeling if he'd be able to find his way back. Then he saw it, a dark shape against the snow, metal twisted and wrong. A car, or what remained of one, its front end wrapped around a massive pine tree like a grotesque embrace. The driver's door hung open, creaking in the wind, and Scout was already there, digging frantically at something half buried in a drift. Owen stumbled closer and felt his heart stop. A woman, her dark hair frozen into crystalline strands, lay motionless in the snow. Her coat was torn, dark stains spreading across the fabric that Owen's mind refused to identify as blood. Scout was licking her face, whimpering, his tail tucked low. Owen dropped to his knees beside her, pulling off his glove to feel for a pulse at her neck. Her skin was like ice, but there, faint as a whisper, he felt it. She was alive. "Help me, Scout." Together, man and dog worked to free her from the snow's grip. She was small, maybe 5'4", but dead weight in Owen's arms as he lifted her. That's when he saw it, clutched in her frozen fingers like she'd been holding on to it even as consciousness fled. A detective's badge, the metal still somehow catching light despite the storm. Rachel Brooks, Montana State Police. Owen's mind raced as he struggled back toward where he hoped the truck waited. A detective, out here, crashed in a storm that no one should have been driving in. He glanced back at the wrecked car once more and noticed something that made his blood run colder than the wind. Tire tracks, barely visible but there, leading away from the scene. Another vehicle had been here, had left her here. Scout led them back, his golden form appearing and disappearing in the snow like a guardian spirit. Owen could hear Penny's frightened voice calling for them before he saw the truck's lights. He managed to get the back door open, laying the unconscious woman across the seat. "Daddy? Who is she? Is she okay?" Penny's questions tumbled over each other as Owen cranked the heat to maximum and grabbed the emergency blankets from under the seat. "She's hurt, baby. We need to get her to the hospital." Scout found her. The dog had already positioned himself on the floor, pressed against the woman as if trying to share what warmth he had. As Owen pulled back onto what he hoped was still the road, he couldn't shake the image of those tire tracks leading away. Someone had been there when she crashed, or maybe caused her to crash, and they'd left her to die in the storm. He pressed harder on the accelerator, fighting every instinct that told him to slow down in the blizzard. In the back seat, Penny had started singing again, soft and low, the same lullaby Lisa used to sing before the cancer took her. The woman's breathing was shallow, rattling. Through the rearview mirror, Owen saw headlights in the distance behind them, appearing for just a moment before the storm swallowed them whole. He told himself it was another traveler, someone else caught in the storm. But Scout's low growl, rumbling from deep in his chest as he watched those vanishing lights, suggested otherwise. The emergency room erupted into controlled chaos the moment Owen carried Rachel Brooks through the sliding doors. "Doctor?" Elena Martinez appeared as if summoned, her experienced eyes taking in the detective's condition in a single sweep before barking orders that sent nurses scurrying in all directions. Core temperatures dropped to 89 degrees. "Get warming blankets, heated IV fluids, cardiac monitoring, now!" She guided Owen to lay Rachel on a gurney, her hands already checking pupils, pulse, breathing. How long was she out there? Owen shook his head, still catching his breath from the struggle through the hospital parking lot. "I don't know. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. My dog found her about 15 miles up Highway 2. Penny pressed against Owen's leg, Scout beside her, both of them watching as the medical team wheeled Rachel away into the depths of the hospital. "Doctor." Martinez paused at the doorway, her expression grave. "She's got severe hypothermia, possible concussion from the crash, and she's lost blood. Those wounds on her side, they're not all from the accident. Some of them look older, maybe a day or two. Did you see anyone else at the scene?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, though Owen couldn't say why it felt that way. "No, just tire tracks leading away. Someone was there and left." Martinez's jaw tightened. "I'll need to report this to the sheriff's department. You should prepare to answer questions." They waited in uncomfortable plastic chairs, the fluorescent lights harsh after the darkness of the storm. Penny had fallen asleep against Owen's shoulder, Scout's head resting on her feet. The waiting room was nearly empty. Just them and an elderly couple, sharing worried whispers. Owen found himself staring at the badge he'd retrieved from Rachel's pocket before the nurses took her clothes. Detective Rachel Brooks, the photo showing a woman with sharp eyes and a determined set to her jaw. What had she been investigating that left her bleeding in a snowbank? The question gnawed at him like hunger. "Mr. Carter." The voice was deep, authoritative, and somehow familiar. Owen looked up to find Sheriff Tom Henderson standing over them, his substantial frame blocking the light. Henderson had been sheriff for 12 years, ran unopposed every election, and commanded the kind of respect that came from fear as much as admiration. His gray eyes were cold as the storm outside as they studied Owen. "Heard you found one of our detectives out on Highway 2. It wasn't a question. Owen nodded, careful not to wake Penny. "Scout found her, actually. She was buried in the snow next to her crashed car." Henderson's eyes narrowed slightly, a micro-expression that Owen might have missed if he hadn't been watching for it. "Scout. That's the dog?" His gaze shifted to the golden retriever, who had lifted his head to stare back. Something passed between animal and man. A moment of mutual assessment that ended when Scout's lips pulled back slightly. Not quite a snarl, but certainly not friendly. "Yes, sir." He led me right to her. "Lucky thing, too." Few more minutes, and Henderson cut him off with a raised hand. "Lucky. Yes. Very lucky that you happened to be driving that particular stretch of road in the worst blizzard we've had in 5 years." The implication hung between them like a blade. Owen felt his jaw clench. "I was coming back from Great Falls with my daughter. Penny had a specialist appointment at the Children's Hospital. You can verify that easily enough. Henderson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Oh, I will. I'll verify everything. See, Detective Brooks was working a sensitive case. Internal affairs type situation. Makes me wonder if her accident was really an accident, and if it wasn't, makes me wonder who might want her out of the way. Owen stood slowly, lifting Penny into his arms without waking her. Are you suggesting I had something to do with this? I saved her life. Did you? Or did you make sure there were witnesses when you found her? Henderson stepped closer, close enough that Owen could smell coffee and something sour on his breath. Scout rose to his feet, positioning himself between them, a low rumble building in his chest. The sheriff looked down at the dog with something like amusement. Protective, isn't he? Almost like he's got something to protect you from. Before Owen could respond, Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. Sheriff Henderson. Mr. Carter. Detective Brooks is stable but still unconscious. She's lucky Mr. Carter found her when he did. Another hour, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Henderson's expression shifted to one of professional concern so quickly it was jarring. Good to hear, Doctor. When can I speak with her? Martinez shook her head. Not for at least 48 hours, possibly longer. She's been through significant trauma. Her body needs time to recover. The sheriff nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Owen's face. Well then, Mr. Carter, I'll need you to come by the station tomorrow. Give a full statement. Every detail about finding her. Sometimes people remember things they didn't realize they saw. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Owen? I'd appreciate it if you didn't leave town for a few days. Just until we sort this all out. Owen watched him go, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor. Scout's growling hadn't stopped until the sheriff turned the corner out of sight. Doctor, Martinez looked between Owen and the empty hallway, her expression troubled. Mr. Carter, can I speak with you privately for a moment? She glanced meaningfully at Penny, still sleeping in his arms. Owen settled his daughter on the chairs with his coat as a blanket. Scout immediately curling up beside her. He followed the doctor a few feet away, still keeping Penny in sight. Detective Brooks's injuries tell a story, Martinez said quietly. The crash injuries are obvious, but there are defensive wounds on her hands and arms. Bruising that's older. She's been in more than one fight recently. And there's something else. She hesitated, clearly debating how much to say. When we undressed her, we found documents sewn into the lining of her coat. I haven't read them, that's not my business. But someone who goes to those lengths is either paranoid or in real danger. She met Owen's eyes directly. That dog of yours might have saved more than just her life. He might have saved whatever she was trying to protect. Be careful, Mr. Carter. In my experience, Sheriff Henderson doesn't ask questions he doesn't already think he knows the answers to. 2 days passed in a blur of hospital visits, worried calls from concerned neighbors, and Owen trying to maintain normalcy for Penny while his mind churned with questions. On the third morning, as February's sun broke through the clouds for the first time since the storm, Owen received the call. Rachel Brooks was awake. He found her propped up in the hospital bed, her face still pale but her eyes alert, studying him with the kind of intensity that probably made suspects confess without being asked. You're the one who found me, she said, her voice hoarse but steady. You and your dog. Scout found you, Owen corrected, setting down the coffee and muffins he'd brought. He knew you were there somehow. I just carried you. Rachel's expression softened slightly. Scout. I remember. Gold fur and warm breath when I thought I was dying. Is he? She stopped as Penny peeked around the doorframe, clutching a piece of paper. Owen sighed. I told you to wait in the hall, sweetheart. But Penny was already approaching the bed with the determination only an 8-year-old could muster. I made this for you, she said, offering the paper to Rachel. It was a crayon drawing of Scout, standing heroically in the snow, a small figure in blue beside him. That's you. Daddy says Scout saved you because that's what heroes do. Rachel took the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. Whether from weakness or emotion, Owen couldn't tell. This is beautiful. Thank you. Penny, the girl supplied, beaming. I'm Penny and that's my dad, Owen, and Scout is at home because dogs can't come to hospitals, which is stupid because Scout is cleaner than most people. Rachel actually smiled, the expression transforming her face from suspicious detective to someone altogether more human. You're absolutely right, Penny. That is a stupid rule. She looked up at Owen. Thank you. Both of you. I understand you've been visiting every day. Seemed wrong to save someone's life and then just disappear, Owen said, then hesitated before adding, Sheriff Henderson's been by to see you? Rachel's expression shuddered immediately, the warmth vanishing. Briefly, I told him I don't remember much about the accident. Head trauma, you know. She touched the bandage around her head lightly. He seemed very concerned. The way she said concerned made it clear she meant the opposite. He also mentioned you've been very helpful, very cooperative. Even offered to let me stay somewhere safe while I recover, since my apartment is apparently being renovated for water damage I don't remember happening. Owen and Rachel locked eyes, a moment of understanding passing between them. Funny thing about that, Owen said carefully, we've got a spare room at our place, quiet, good for recovery. Scout's excellent security, and Penny would love the company. She doesn't get much female influence since. He trailed off, the words since her mother died, sticking in his throat. Rachel studied him for a long moment. That's very generous, but I couldn't impose. I don't even know you. Penny, who had been quietly coloring in another corner of her drawing, looked up with eyes that were Lisa's, brown and earnest. Mommy always said we should help people who need help. And you